Okay, next up is going to be Cooldown, Unfrozen book number 1, LitRPG series, written by Anton Tekshin. This is a Russian translation story. It is 535 pages, $3.09. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. If you're going to stick your hand into somebody else's refrigerator, you better be ready to deal with the consequences. Especially when instead of perishable foodstuff, the icebox in question contains people who are provisionally alive. That's such a confusing paragraph. They haven't died yet. Death has not made them up its mind about them. And even though most of them will never open their eyes, the lucky few do stand the ghost of a chance of returning to this world. What a pity that among these fortunate souls there is one man who thought his earthly affairs concluded for all eternity. His case file bristles with cautionary attributes such as serial killer, extremist, and mentally unstable. And yet, could this be the best candidate for an assignment that has already claimed the lives of several veteran operators? Who knows? Wow, that is not a particularly great description of this novel, I'll be honest. That is the setup for like maybe the introduction of what happens in the first, 5% of the story. This is a Russian translation story whose story puts up a vigilante investigator into cryostasis instead of being killed by corrupt officials. He wakes up 24 years later and is tasked with going into a full immersion space virtual reality MMO to solve the locked door room mystery murder of a prominent clan member of the game. That's the actual setup of the story. There's the novel does absolutely nothing to tell you how this is LitRPG. It is though. However, in practice, even though that is the setup, this is really just a slice of life story. The main character adventures, tries to gain as many achievements to catch the attention of the clans as he can, and pops out of game occasionally to update his employer and plan what goals he has in game. There is a little bit of intrigue in the story, but generally it's an interesting and action-ish adventure with a survival sabotage game mode in the last 25% of the story. So mostly this is a slice of life, science fiction, space, virtual reality MMO kind of game, kind of story. The story around it in the real world with him being a vigilante detective, I guess it's entertaining on its own, at least. But it's mostly just there to kind of justify him being thrown into the future where this technology exists, and kind of direct his actions a little bit in game, and then giving him purpose. You have to do these really hard quests and do these, try to get these achievements because we're trying to get you into the clan so you can investigate this thing. And although none of that really matters by the end of the story, it does direct him a little bit more than just, him wanting to, game because, but not much more. Again, most of the story is just him being in this space opera virtual reality MMO, figuring out what kind of character he wants to be and going on some adventures. Sometimes he's in a ship, sometimes he's on planet, doing these quests and stuff. And ultimately it still is entertaining. It really is. It's just that the real life stuff, it's ultimately doesn't matter. But I didn't expect it to, and I've read worse. That's kind of what it comes down to. The real life storyline, is if it was just on of its own, it would be a science fiction kind of cyberpunk thing. And it would be entertaining on its own. It's not badly written or anything, but it has very little to do with the purpose of the virtual reality MMO exploration. It just kind of sits there as this, occasionally I'm popping up back to the real world, and my handler is okay, good job there. Let's get you back in it because things aren't going well for us, and we need to figure out a way to get into the land to figure out the murders. Except that ultimately it doesn't matter. It really is just kind of just a way to direct him towards particular quests and stuff and reasons for him to do it. On the game mechanic side of things, really good. It really is. The author goes out of his way to describe classes and descriptions and weapon descriptions and the game mechanics and the sci-fi reasons for it and all the different classes and abilities and how they kind of cooperate or one's overpowered and one's not in particular situations. And they're on the quests themselves. again, lots of notifications and very interesting quests. It in some ways it feels like a series of short stories and the virtual reality side of things, where the main character is going on these adventures, and they're entertaining. They're interesting. On their own, that would be entertaining as well. And it's not bad. It's just like, oh, okay, it is what it is. It really, for the most part, is a slice of life story. The main character is in a virtual reality MMO world, and the game setting is space opera stuff, where he's trying to do these like outrageous adventures and outrageous achievements on purpose. And so there was a bit of a motivation for him to be outlandish and not just take a safe path of grinding out quests necessarily. And so but that's what it is. It's not super amazing in that there's no real cohesion of plot here. And yet overall still pretty decent. I've read worse setups of why someone has to go into virtual reality world to grind a character. That's kind of what it is. So for me, entertaining still. I don't know that I would read a second book just because of the ending of this first book, but you know, if you have nothing else to read, this is fairly decent. Gets a score of 7.4 out of 10. Again, not amazing. Just like fairly, it's like slightly less than middle of the road good. But overall, I'm like, okay, I wouldn't regret purchasing it. For me, it's kind of a one-off in that it was entertaining enough to keep me going, but nothing particularly like super special. That's Cooldown, Unfrozen, book number 1 with the score of 7.4 out of 10.